asistiendo a las escenas más sorprendentes, a cualquier lugar de la ciudad o del país en donde haya un acontecimiento de fuerte interés humano.
We had this idea of doing Backdraft in sort of an Indiana Jones style.
The intensity as temperatures around you reach 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
Once everyone sort of agreed that this was the idea we wanted to go with, we then sat down with the Backdraft technical team and I said to them, tell me everything that you wish you could have done in Backdraft but didn't do. And so they started listing off things they wish they could have done. An L-shaped audience viewing area, so you had more of a view in like this instead of in a flat area looking that way. Things that happened above you or behind you. Some of these things we never were able to do. More things that could happen up close to you. And so we made a list of all the things that we wish we could have done and tried to then in the design come up with things that we could do to tick off the boxes of those things.
La referència era Backdraft, no? Jo vaig estar visitant Backdraft per dins, a la nit, com feien el manteniment, tot això, i tot i el gas i tot això, vam veure una altra cosa. Jo crec que el Temple del Fuego, aquesta és una atracció que va ser molt diferent, no? Era una atracció, no, també era així tancada i tal, però aquesta, amb aquelles flamarades, aquells esqueletos aixecant-se, tot allò és fabulós, no? I jo crec que és una atracció que tenia èxit.
And then Templo is my proudest attraction.
Un antiguo templo azteca.
I was the producer.
De una terrible maldición.
Dealing with schedules, budgets, then making sure none of the creative was being diluted during the process. Backdraft was made, and our studios, our offices were at Hollywood, so we literally could take the elevator down, cross into the studio, and go right into Backdraft and go walk. I don't know how many times we viewed a performance of Backdraft, and then the team said, "Okay, how do we see all the cool things? How do we use them better?" We really wanted to add a live person because the difference between us and Disney was we can kill a character. We have stuntmen, get killed every show. So the idea that we could have a character that perishes was a fun part of the story.
Wanted him to die, and it's like, that's a crazy idea. You normally don't kill a performer in a show in a theme park, and that's it. That's the start of the curse. We wanted it to feel like a universal attraction. That was part of the strategy, but without any specific IP.
Un tesoro escondido.
To me and Jimmy Pickering, the art director, this was sort of a love letter to Steven Spielberg. We wanted this to feel like you were stepping into a Spielberg movie. Again, no IP. To your point, like where's the IP?
Templo del Fuego.
And so everything there, I think, makes you feel like you're stepping into an amazing adventure film, all the way down to the last moment where, everything blows up.
And all the issues and mistakes they had on Backdraft, we were able to learn, so we didn't have. Because the building's much more complex than you would expect. We probably had more issues on trying to make sure we maintain safety through the construction because of the volume of the space, and we needed the volume because we needed the heat to go up, and we needed the heat to get out of the building. So the air circulation, we had to make sure we were pushing air from the bottom and sucking air out the top so we could recirculate the air. I think it was every 60 seconds. And that way the heat didn't expand the building, and the big fireballs and those things are very percussious, and they create air pressure. Okay. If you don't have a place for the air to go, it can tear apart your building. We learned all that from Backdraft, so we didn't have we could design the building to not have those issues. So we were very fortunate. I think Backdraft made it so that we didn't have to reinvent the wheel.
All those projects were very fast track. I did what's called a show timing chart, where you break down the entire sequence of the show into seconds, basically a cue sheet for the show, and started to lay in all of the elements for that. And then from that, we backed into the pre-show and developed the pre-show second, the main show first. And then after that, we started to talk about what is the environment that this temple is in, what kind of environment is around it. We started doing a lot of research of what would an archaeological encampment look like in the early 1900s.
Aquí en Los Ángeles, en lo que es Universal Studios Hollywood, tenían todo una maqueta. Entonces yo pude ir a ver lo que ellos tenían en mente y después nos dieron como dibujos de lo que tenía que ser, pero eso, cuando Templo del Fuego es como un castillo, entonces era interpretar cómo es que se va a envejecer eso. La pasamos muy lindo envejeciendo esos edificios. Nos trajimos artistas desde Inglaterra para trabajar en los detalles.
Me mostraron la maqueta y a mí se me caía la baba a ver aquel proyecto y decía, va, esto es increíble. Claro, yo siendo de Tarragona, yo tenía mucha pasión por la aventura. Este es el desarrollo que yo quiero para mi provincia.
Él nos ayudó, él modelaba cosas de cemento, nos traía cosas, lo que necesitáramos. Él nos encontraba lo que necesitaba, pero también un talento increíble.
Estuve con Ernie Merlam, el gran maestro pintor que estaba director artístico.
Paco iba y me traía serrín de todos los carpinteros de la zona, quizás 20, que nos den toda la basura que tengan. Y lo llenábamos de agua y lo exprimíamos así, lo tirábamos en las paredes, que cubríamos todo con acerrín. Y después yo tengo una técnica donde con 4 pistolas de pintura de diferentes colores pintaba todo el edificio. Y el próximo día barríamos todo el acerrín y quedaba como envejecido, ¿no? Como moho por todo. Eso lo usamos por todo el Templo del Fuego, ¿no? Todas las paredes parecen que tienen ese moho porque usamos esa técnica por todo. Y quizás el trabajador ese día no tenía que ser un pintor ni artístico, tenía que simplemente tirar serrín contra la pared.
Entonces hicimos todas las colas de entrada con las raíces, el árbol quemado por el rayo, todos los edificios de colas. Él cogía la malla desde una punta, la estiraba con otra persona y la malla se retuerce. Cuando se retuerce le das la forma y le das el recorrido. Entonces ya luego viene el modelado con el paletín, con la espátula, con lo que quieras. Se proyecta y se trabaja el mortero.
I first started doing projects with Universal in 1989. One of the landscape architects we introduced to the team, we had worked on Islands of Adventure together, and then he came on to the Templo team, and he picked planting materials that looked like they were already burned, right? So the leaves were black on the plants, or the materials were already as if the fire had touched them. And so at night, it was really fun to light that landscaping out in front of the attraction and to light the facade of the attraction and to really start the story from the exterior and then work our way into the attraction.
Eso todo se hizo así, ¿no? Porque donde el serrín había tapado, no cae la pintura. Pero donde el serrín dejó huecos, podíamos pintar. Entonces, con todos esos colores yo le iba variando. Si uno solo lo pinta sólido y aunque le eche un lavado encima, no deja esa técnica, ¿no? Claro. Entonces tenía que darle una historia de que aquí, cuando estaba tapado de todo el bosque, hubiera tenido moho encima o diferentes plantas. Entonces ya al quitarle las plantas, deja una marca de los 1000 años que estuvo ahí, ¿no?
Now, in modern day theme park attractions, there is a lot of lighting equipment, consoles or programming consoles that have a flicker effect already in them. So a lighting designer could choose to use that pre-programmed flicker effect, Where when we did Templo del Fuego, that is us programming every step of the flicker and every bit of randomness to make it try to look as real as possible, right? So every little up and down and every little moment of dark and every little flicker took us hours to program. And we went to great pains to make sure that they weren't all doing the same thing at once, because if all of them flickered at the same time, it wouldn't look real.
En España no solo hace mucho sol y mucho calor, pero en lo que es Cataluña hace un frío tremendo. A veces amanecía en la mañana y la pintura estaba toda helada, no teníamos que calentarla antes de empezar a pintar. Todavía queda muy lindo, todavía ha quedado muy lindo. Entonces, hay lugares donde si el sol le pega todo el día, yo tengo murales que hemos pintado que en 8 años se desvanecen porque el sol le pega todo el día. Yo trabajé en la película La Máscara del Zorro,
Sí.
con Antonio Banderas y Anthony Hopkins en México. Y había una directora, Cecilia, que siempre decía, no sirve, le falta algo, pero nunca me podía decir qué es lo que le faltaba. Y entonces nos dimos cuenta que lo que a ella le encantaba es un lavado de color siena. Ella le encantaba ese color. Entonces lo que aprendí es, al terminar todo, le pongo siempre un lavado de siena y eso le da vida. En la pintura uno tiene que echarle lavados oscuros a algunas partes y no tan oscuros en otros para que esa piedra se vea, para que la diferencia entre la piedra se vea.
The facade was a little colder to make the other lights feel warmer. We did pick a color temperature that was a little different to give that juxtaposition. And also it speaks to archaeologists didn't really pay attention to color temperature. They didn't really, right? So story-wise, we want you to think it's a bunch of people who didn't pay attention to those elements.
Francois Bergeron, who became my business partner at Thinkwell, came out of Cirque du Soleil, and he did sound design for all the Cirque shows. We hired him because he had done O in Vegas, and that was a water-based show. And we knew the acoustics with water are very difficult because water does not absorb sound, it bounces sound. And so we hired him to help design the audio system and do the sound design. He did a lot of research into vintage Mexican music that you would have heard on the radio. That was playing in the queue in the encampment. We hired a Spanish radio announcer to be our vintage radio announcer on the radio. And all of the script for that all has little secrets and things that relate back to the attraction. Just lots of little things. The whole queue turned out so beautifully. The attention to detail, particularly from the art director, was absolutely amazing.
Photography may allow parking and permitted inside the ruins. Remember, our archaeologists are at work.
We have a lot of musical inspiration from a lot of great motion pictures too. So the music and the sound design both are really, really great.
Music was done in the U.S. and we started it early because the pacing of the show was dependent on the music. Craig had a composer, Lou Fagenson. Was a composer that Craig had worked with before and really also liked all his. He did a lot of composing for animation, for television animation series, and so we worked with Lou early on for the early scratch tack for the video animation. So we knew the show had to be paced. Yeah. So really, I think Craig was really good at using the music to move the story, right? We only have 6 minutes to tell a story, so you use the music to help create the environment and help create the energy and stuff. And that Fiesta Ventura was missing a sound designer.
Okay.
We had a composer, but the sound designer could have helped give some of those extra beats and those extra punches or those extra little noises and sounds that suck you in even farther. You know, makes you believe the story's real because it's around you. Francois worked with the composer and made sure that the sound effects we needed was almost as part of the composition of the music. And Francois was very good with that. Francois is one of my favorite audio design. You know, no one can move sound better than Francois. You know, he just had a skill for knowing how to use audio design as a tool for making you believe you're in the real environment, making sure that the sound moves when you need it to move. And with fire, you're limited on lighting.
Yeah.
Because the minute the fire turns on, all your controlled lighting is useless.
Correct.
You know, the fire takes over.
Fire puts off a lot of light. And so as a lighting designer, I have to balance the lighting in the room or in the scene to work with where we know those moments of fire are going to come. So whether it was the zombies popping up, you know, appearing out of the water in the flames, or whether it was the big fireballs up on the kind of altar area of Templo del Fuego, all of those story beats play into what we are doing with the lighting. And then with the Universal team, that was the first project I met Cliff Warner on, and Seth, and just an amazing, amazing team really came together. And because my roots at Disney involved show quality standards, I was very keen on giving them a lighting system that they would be able to maintain over time. Everybody in PortAventura that we worked with cared so much about that park and cared so much about the guest and the guest experience, and how we were all able to come together and work as a team was really, it was great. It was really, really lovely.
Fireball was the other big effect that was like, we got to have a big fireball. And, you know, Craig wants it as big as possible. So Attraction Services, the company that was doing the flame and all the effects, really worked hard to figure out how to do it safely. You know, because you're shooting a 30-foot fireball at the audience. And that, you know, and that was a big moment. That's a moment that everybody backs up, you know, from. So that was, those beats were great. Those were our seaplane moments.
To better understand the ride, we must first take an overview. The attraction consists of 4 main areas. The main building, where the show takes place, is the most visible part of the construction, standing approximately 15 meters high. Adjacent to it is the pre-show building, which is noticeably smaller in size and surprisingly misaligned with the main building, but we will discuss this detail later. Before the pre-show building lies the preloading area, a space designed to accommodate a group of 160 guests before they access the pre-show. Finally, the largest section includes the regular and extended queues, which span across a vast area. These queues also incorporate the former queue buildings of the ride Checkmo. It was a flippered model from the German manufacturer Huss. In the 2000 season, the ride was relocated to the far west area and rethemed under the name Volpe UT, leaving the free space to allow the construction. Interestingly, the original Chukmul statue, now hidden within the queue area of Templo del Fuego, was originally positioned at the entrance of the old ride.
And yes, by the way, this is me.
As observed from above, the pre-show building is not perfectly aligned with the main one. There is a gap between the 2 buildings that corresponds to the double rolling door, which opens during the pre-show. Both doors are fire-rated, acoustically insulated, and operate independently via a chain-driven mechanism.
Estas puertas son 2 guías correderas que estaban preparadas sobre un mecanismo y se tenía que hacer un revestimiento como la piedra, pero no podía pesar. El mortero se trabaja muy bien para crear la piedra, ¿no? Para este caso concreto, como tenía que ser una puerta que deslizara sin mucho peso, Entonces aquí le dimos la solución de poner una malla y con resina de poliéster también darle la textura. O sea, el poliéster se trabaja muy bien cuando se trabaja sobre molde, porque es un líquido que al final tiene que curar sobre molde. Pero aquí creamos una masilla con la resina de poliéster para trabajarlo como el mortero. O sea, fabricamos la masilla, hicimos todo el revestimiento, pusimos la malla, hicimos el revestimiento y lo pintamos y quedó ese efecto. Quedó el mismo efecto que la piedra, pero pesaba 4 veces menos que la piedra. Entonces, esto fue otro éxito de la ingeniería aplicada.
The main gas supply is located at the rear of the building. On the roof of the main building, hidden by the themed parapet, many air ventilation units can be seen. There are approximately 16 units in total. The failure of more than 2 of them would result in a show stop. There is also a large water tank designed to drain all the water from the main show area during maintenance tasks. Now, let's take a closer look at the show elements. The ride control system consists of 3 different systems that work together, along with a large central sound system that manages the audio effects for the entire ride, including the actors' microphones. The main control panel is where the operator is stationed. Additionally, there are 2 other systems. One controls all the mechanical elements, and the other manages all the fire effects. To understand how the effects are monitored, let's look at some examples. All areas of the ride, as well as all the elements, whether mechanical or fire-related, are equipped with multiple redundancy systems. As a conceptual explanation, the main fireball effect relies on several key components. There are 2 separate inputs, one for gas and another for compressed air. A few seconds before the effect is triggered, sensors open the valves, allowing the fluids to fill 2 separate tanks until the desired pressure is reached. Once this is achieved, the pilot flame at the end of the fire cannon is activated and monitored by a sensor. If everything is functioning correctly, the final valve opens, releasing the high-pressure mix of gas and air to create the dramatic fireball effect. When the actor exits the stage through the mouth, both the actor and the operator must press a button to confirm the activation of the fireball effect. Any slight discrepancy in timing or sensor readings will immediately stop the effect and, potentially, stop the ride. The 3 vertical fireballs in the water operate using the exact same system. Each requires a few minutes to recharge the tanks, which is why they are only activated twice per show. The brain fire effect operates on the same principle but without an additional pressure tank. The pilot flame is activated and confirmed by a sensor, and a valve briefly opens the gas supply for a few seconds, creating the iconic effect. The burning water effect is as simple as the brain fire effect. The pilot flame is hidden within the scenery above the water. When the gas supply is opened, the gas is released underwater and naturally floats to the surface, where it ignites upon contact with the pilot flame, creating the combustion effect.
I remember the very first meeting with the fire brigade. We presented the idea and they basically just looked at us like they thought we were insane. Like they were just like, what are you talking about? You know? And we flew out one of our technical guys from Universal Hollywood, and he started walking through the safety systems and the checks and the equipment, the sensors, and all that other stuff. I think they started to realize, 1, we were serious, and 2, maybe it could be done.
One effect we all loved was the brain fire, and in Backdraft it was very much upstage. So unless you're looking for it, you don't notice it, but it's the coolest. They show it in the video in the pre-show, and then you have to look for it in the show, and we said, how can we bring that forward? Okay. So in Temple de Fuego, it's 2.5 meters away from the guest. It's beautiful but scary because you feel the heat, and that's one of the things we did is in designing the theater. It was designed to move that effect.
We wanted to get it as close to the audience as we could, and it works, and it's great. Brain fire is like my favorite thing.
And then surprisingly, the skeletons that pop out of the water, there was this undesigned pleasant happening where, because the skulls were molded and their mouths were like open like for screaming, they created a little cup. So when they go down, the cup fills up with water, and when it shoots up, the water throws at people. So that these monsters are like barfing at the guests, and it was a great unintended effect. So those things are fun to see too. So when you have something like that, you're going, awesome, but I wish we had thought of it.
Esto venía de una empresa de Valencia. Habían fabricado los modelos y los enviaron sin pintar ni nada, ¿no? Estaban blancas todas. Nosotros las ensangrentamos, le hicimos la carne podrida, un poco del verde, de haber estado... Porque como están sumergidas en agua, durante la atracción, pues teníamos que darle un poco ese aspecto.
It took a lot to put the underwater lights on those zombies. That was technologically really difficult to figure out between the fire lines and the water level and all of the special effects that are in the water to try to figure that out and find a fixture that wouldn't explode at the time was really difficult.
We had such a tight budget. We figured out what we had to cut before we had to start.
I have never been the type of designer that just uses technology because it exists. I always try to find the right technology for the application or for the story we're trying to tell. And then for the budget and all the other constraints a project has.
The big challenges I recall specifically, one was there could be no flammable material in the show box. Everything you see in there is mostly steel and concrete. Anything that looks like wood is not wood. It's either steel or concrete.
Sale fuego a través de las escaleras. Estaban previstas a hacer en acero. La textura, el acabado no era igual que de todo el decorado. Entonces, pues si ponemos aquí unas varillas, ponemos unas mallas y utilizamos un mortero que nos sirva para el fuego, podemos modelarlo.
That posed a lot of material challenges for the scenic. Also hiding speakers inside rockwork.
Los altavoces son estas calaveras que hay aquí. Está mezclado un poco lo que es la malla, que está hecha con resina ignífuga, porque como al lado hay fuego, debía ser algo que resistiera al fuego, y a través de los ojos, la nariz, la boca, sale el sonido. Entonces les encantó la idea, ¿no?
All of that had to be acoustically transparent, but also look like rock. We had to innovate a whole new methodology for putting a screen in front of a speaker.
Yo creo que lo que usamos es algo que se llama Dry Hard Flat, que es una pintura que conseguimos aquí. La pintura tiene tres partes. Toda pintura tiene tres partes. Tiene lo que es el medium, en lo que se aguanta el pigmento. El pigmento es lo segundo, el color. Y lo tercero es lo que uno le pone, sea pegamentos o sea protección contra el UV o cosas así. Entonces, cuando uno está primeando algo, no necesitas todo lo del UV y todo lo que se le echa después. Solo se necesita el pigmento. Y para el medium se usaría algo que sea casi como un pegamento, como un glue, ¿no? Porque eso es lo más importante al principio. Después, cuando uno le pone color, evito ponerle mucho medium o mucho pigmento blanco. Quiero que tenga vida, quiero que sea transparente. Entonces, en esos casos, la pintura no tiene que tener el UV ni el pegamento, pero tiene que tener la transparencia y el pigmento, ¿no? Y al final, cuando uno ya quiere proteger todo, se le tiene que echar un medium que sea claro, pero con esas protecciones de UV. Entonces, tuvimos mucho cuidado en ponerle eso encima. También los lavados lo hacíamos con lo mismo. Así que si lo protegíamos una vez con el clear coat que tuviera el UV, lo mismo hacíamos al echarle los lavados y a envejecerlo, le echábamos más protección y más protección. Así que sería muy difícil que eso se faded.
Sí, se difuminara, desapareciera.
Sí.
You want people to enter that main show to feel like they're just being brought along on the tour. That light that is coming from the ceiling is really meant to feel like you're seeing the nighttime sky, that you have entered into the depths of the temple, but there's maybe a hole in the ceiling and you're getting that kind of little bit of moonlight coming in. And it's just a beautiful setting because we want people to feel calm and like that that maybe they're still safe, even though we know things are about to go terribly wrong. They already went wrong in that other scene. I do remember the first time we ran the attraction with the actual guest, when things started to go wrong in that main room, there was a couple in front of me who really got very scared, and they were trying to get over the railing to get out of the building because they thought fire was really erupting, right? Because at the time that there was not an attraction like that at PortAventura, and nobody had seen anything like this. But so there's all of these little things that are details in the technology that had to come together to make those scenes work. And there's lights hidden all over that main room that are making that room come to life in addition to the fire. And there's moments where we're supplementing what the fire is doing. So the fireball might erupt, but then we're the after effect to that fireball. And if we've done our job correctly, you don't realize that that's what's happening. It just looks like it's all coming from the fire.
That was a big deal. Was suddenly all of the material choices had to be very, very carefully chosen and very specific about what they were made of, and flammability and paints and all that stuff.
Ya casi no usamos pinturas que tengan base de petróleo. Casi todas las pinturas que se usan ahora es acrílica o vinil. No, entonces de esa preocupación no tanto. Me imagino que hay zonas de tantos años de recibir fuego que se han oscurecido. Humedad es otra cosa que uno se tiene que preocupar porque había mucha agua en lo que es el Templo del Fuego. Entonces, la técnica fue más o menos la misma, ¿no? Porque las mismas cosas que protegen del sol van a proteger de la humedad y de la temperatura. Así que no digo que fue tan diferente, solo que tener en mente que esta zona la tenemos que proteger porque va a estar húmeda todo el tiempo. O esta zona la tenemos que proteger porque va a tener temperaturas altas, pero no tanto de que usaríamos un material diferente.
Realmente utilizó un sistema de escalada muy chulo, ¿no? Colgándose con unos se hizo como unos puentes de cuerdas para poder pasar de una parte a la otra del escenario. Fue increíble, o sea, fue chulísimo. El tío colgado allí con la pistola y nosotros desde abajo sirviéndole, haciéndole las zonas de abajo.
Claro, esos todos son pintores.
Son pintores.
Ahí está David y está Peralta. Esos todos son pintores, sí. Incluso puede ser que yo haya tomado esa foto.
If I want you to see the light, I'll make sure that you see the physical light fixture. So like in the queue line where you could see the actual shade and the fixture, or inside where you see the lanterns throughout the attraction. Those are lights we want you to see because they're helping to tell the story. There are a lot of lights where we are trying to hide them or put them behind scenery or within scenery to light the scene. And sometimes we might put a lantern on a crate that looks like it is lighting the whole scene, but there might be a light hidden in that crate that's really doing the heavy lifting and really lighting the scene. It's part of the magic that we want you to experience when you go in the space. We also want to make sure that it feels like the lighting is from the archaeologists who have been studying the temple, right? So how do we do that? And how do we make it look like the wiring is like just organically there as opposed to the real electricity that is hiding?
Una mica com a curiositat tècnica pels enginyers és que vam tenir d'anar, no dic una antena nova de gas natural, però sí, vam tenir d'anar, ja hi havia una xarxa de gas natural en tot el parc, que l'havien fet durant la construcció, però aquí vam tenir, des de l'escomesa principal de gas, vam tenir d'anar una canonada nova, exclusiva, perquè la demanda i uns dipòsits de pulmó, perquè la demanda de les flamarades aquelles són tremendes, bum! I per tant, doncs, bueno, tenia la seva part també, no? Perquè era molt interessant. El consum de gas va ser, en aquests moments, en gas natural vam estar parlant amb els enginyers i ens ho van estudiar molt i la veritat és que van ajudar molt perquè ens van acotar molt bé la capacitat de la canonada, el pulmó, que no ens tirés a baix el reste de la instal·lació de gas, que les cuines no es quedessin sense gas, no? Etcètera, no? Cada vegada.
When the actor approaches the left basin, a sudden explosion occurs. This is a simple yet effective effect created by a compressed air tank that is rapidly released. Although the cannon shoots only air, the condensation and surrounding water make it appear like a water cannon. A few seconds before the stairs begin to collapse, the actor positions themselves in the designated location. This is because the stairs are made up of two separate sections that open using air bellows, one in the bottom and another one at the top. To activate the second part of the stairs, the actor subtly presses a button located at the top right before exiting the stage through the mouth. The fire on the stairs is produced by a zigzag burner. A similar system is used for both podiums, but with a circular shape.
Vamos, lo paellero de toda la vida.
The fire in the treasures also uses this system. The boiling water effect is achieved using the same principle, but by injecting compressed air into pipes with small openings located underwater. The mummy pop effect is achieved using two pneumatic tanks that provide pressure to 4 pneumatic cylinders. These cylinders rapidly push the mummies out of the pool, creating a sudden and dynamic motion. The system also powers an air cannon, adding to the dramatic and impressive effect. Originally, the show featured a dense fog at the beginning, created by water misters. Unfortunately, due to the stricter Legionnaire's disease regulations in Spain, published in 2003 and 2022, the effect has been permanently removed, along with all mist effects in the queues. One of the lesser-known effects can be heard in this video. It sounds like cracks as the stairs break. The sound of small explosions is produced when tiny oxygen bubbles are released underwater and explode upon contact with the fire. The theater is continuously monitored by several oxygen and temperature sensors that can stop the show in case of any problem. The large platform on which the audience is standing is equipped with multiple pneumatic actuators. During certain moments of the show, such as the opening of the god's mouth, the actuators slowly raise the platform a few centimeters. At the end of the show, the actuators release all the air, causing the platform to drop abruptly as a final effect, surprising the audience.
And then the other piece of it was instantaneous temperature on a guest. We were taking laser temperature readings on the foreheads of the guests to validate that at no one time did we go above, I think it was 115 Fahrenheit. I don't remember for sure. After we had done that, they said a black person, their skin is more absorptive of heat because of the color of their skin. And so we had to bring in a black person and do the same readings off of their skin to verify that we weren't going over. And then we had temperature sensors in there. We have oxygen readers in there. There's all sorts of safety equipment in there to make sure that nothing is going to be a problem. And so we had to have a special reverse osmosis filtration system on the water treatment because of Legionnaire's disease, which was a completely new thing.
Tenia un problema a l'estiu i a l'hivern també, que havíem de cuidar molt la legionela perquè hi ha molta aigua amb una temperatura dubtosa i per tant això ho vam treballar molt i teníem dispositius contra la legionela i analítica contínua i per tant no em va fer mai por perquè ho vam cuidar sempre molt bé.
We're developing the show. Originally we thought we had a $30 million budget. Okay. Which is what they would pay for a whole ride system and all the things around it. And then once we did the concept, they told us, no, we want it for under 20.
It was a small budget, and I think it doesn't look like a small budget. It looks like a big budget.
Look, because I come from theater, and theater always had you know, unless you were on Broadway or on one of the biggest stages in Europe, you always had budget constraints, right? So for me, it's all about figuring out how to spend my clients' money the wisest. How do you make the most, how do you find the story? How do you tell the story? How do you support that story? How does a park maintain that attraction?
We really had to go back and really figure out how do you cut a third of the budget without losing the story. We worked with an animated group to help create a really simple, especially at this time, and it wasn't being done at the time, an animatic of the 6-minute show. And it had a timing thing on it. So we were able to say, okay, here's the beats, here's the timing, here's a little bit of a scratch track so we understood the music. And it was very crude, it was very simple. You know, considering how we do white models now and how we can do fly-throughs and walkthroughs, so not simple, but much easier than then. Because literally then we had to have a storyboard. It was helping the team visualize what the show can be and what thing was important in the show. Okay, we maybe don't need 12 of these. We could go down to 6 of them. I think we finally got it down to a little over 15 million. So it was significantly cut in half.
We work very hard with the scenic designers and with the prop people to find hiding places for lights or find places where we can put the lights where they won't be readily visible to the guest. That is an effect that Jimmy Pickering and I worked very hard on to try to get the phantoms to move correctly up the walls and to get them in the right places. And since to this day you don't know where those lights are located, I'm going to actually keep that a secret because I like that there's a little magic for anybody going in the attraction. So I am old enough that I come from the days where that not knowing really enhanced your guest experience. So I like that there's a little intrigue or a little magic, or somebody else will have to go to the attraction and try to see if they can figure it out. So if you're okay with me not telling you, I'm gonna reserve that one as still a magical effect. It is an off-the-shelf product that we modified and customized in order to have that effect work. That product still exists today. It projects not only the phantoms, but it also does some of the fire effects that come from lighting or the effects where we are putting texture on the walls. So it's used in a variety of different positions throughout the attraction. Somewhere in my office, I'm looking around because for years I have there were a number of phantom discs. So we made disc of the phantoms that go up the walls. And Jimmy drew probably 30 or 40 different types of phantoms. And we would try them in these discs because the projectors that project those phantoms are lighting fixtures. They're not like projectors projecting media. So it is almost like projecting a gobo on a pattern of the phantoms on the wall. But certain shapes, they just look like they were turning. They weren't climbing the wall. So we had to work really hard with where the position of the fixtures would be and how the wheels in this certain light fixture would move and what the shapes of the phantoms were in order to make it look like they were climbing. And somewhere here I have all of the rejected phantoms, all the ones we tried. I have them all on like a flimsy little paper that we did all the testing with. And because they were all amazing, different styles of phantoms. And I was like, I'm not throwing these away because I remember all of the tests and all of the things we learned from them. So somewhere in my office, there is the lantern that the archaeologist carries, the prototype, and then these the phantom shapes that we ended up not using.
We were using all the effects and all the wow pieces were already technology that existed. We were just giving it a new story. When you do like a stunt show and to cheat the story, you say, we're going to do demonstrations. So they'll show you a stunt, they'll say, and cut. And then you move to the next scene. Our goal always at PortAventura was they needed to be full stories.
Okay.
They weren't stunt demonstrations. They weren't effects demonstrations. It was a story. And that story had a beginning, middle, and end. And our goal was to get people excited when they walked out. When they were leaving, we hoped we blew them away.
Templo del Fuego.
Los escultores formaron todos esos dibujos, ¿no? Pero si no se le pone color en los relieves, en lo que sale, no se ve. Más en la oscuridad no se ve. Entonces tuvimos que pintarlo como si fuera una pintura, ¿no? De todos los relieves se le va dando, pero en una técnica que en inglés diríamos dry brush, o solo en brocha seca,
vale.
No para que todas las puntitas vayan recibiendo pintura. Mandaron el telón y se estiró aquí. Si no estoy equivocado, esto se pintó en lo que se llama un scrim, pero esa es la técnica, es de pintar en UV en una tela y atrás tener pintado normalmente para poder prender las luces detrás y después al prender las luces UV aparece este monstruo. Indiana Jones en Disneyland. Yo fui uno de los pintores principales, que no es tan diferente al Templo del Fuego. Así que yo robé muchas técnicas de lo que era Indiana Jones en Disneylandia. Pero en el caso de ese, como querían ahorrarse dinero, apagaban luces que ellos no veían necesarias. Vale. No, pero para el UV es súper importante apagar todas las demás luces y solo tener el UV.
The blacklight effect for the big phantom or the smaller phantoms and that effect, those were all trying different things until we found the right one that was going to work. And I think that's really important for people to understand that part of design is trying different things and bringing your design knowledge together to say, I know what might work. Let's try this.
Así como el templo del
el templo, uy, allí hay mucho más, yo no me acerco.
Yo tampoco me acerco.
No.
¡Rápido, por aquí, por favor! ¡Rápido! ¡Vamos, apártense! ¡Apártense a la cama del infierno! ¡Fuego! ¡Pero no me toquen!
Escolti, m'he agafat a PortAventura, Aniré a treballar a PortAventura, jo. Seré actor de PortAventura. Bons comediants, com Cosa de Carrer, en saben molt. Molts venien diguem així, de l'espectacle, molts havien fet musicals, eren cantants, bailarins, hi havia actors, i molts veníem del teatre tradicional. Només les 4 indicacions de comediant, aprofitar les altures. Que tens una paret, puja dalt la paret, que et veuran molt més, no? Que tens això, aprofita allò, que hi ha una rampa, puja dalt la rampa, o fes això. Aquest racó, no, perquè aquest racó no et veuran, posa't en aquest altre aquí al mig. Jo he disfrutat com un camell amb una muntanya russa.
El parque de atracciones PortAventura ha decidido contar con él para presentar su nueva y arriesgada atracción. Allí, rodeado de prensa y admiradores, el actor ha hecho gala de un físico del que se siente muy orgulloso.
Me alegro de ser vanidoso porque Dios me dio un cuerpo y yo tenía dos opciones: comer patatas fritas mientras veía la tele o tratar de mejorarlo.
Este lo hicimos nosotros, sí. Que luego lo llevamos a la Fira del Automóvil a Barcelona. Lo hicimos y lo transportamos para poder hacer la presentación de un coche que se presentaba. Era una pancarta que iba adelante para que no se viese, era como la inauguración. Entonces, cuando él estaba detrás, se hizo una actuación con unos actores que se pegaban fuego tal y cual, y en el momento en que se hacía la presentación, caía la sábana y se veía lo del Templo del Fuego.
Do you recognize this person?
Oh, shit. Yeah. I thought that I knew everything. I thought I had nothing I could possibly learn more, that I was the expert, I'd done it all. And I could not imagine how wrong I was at the time. The amount of stuff I've learned and the experience that I've gained over the years, the thing I love to learn. I love new projects. I love our industry because every project is different. It's just a great way to gain more experience. And I remember being so cocky at that age, thinking I work at Universal. Look at me. I'm the creative director. I just do what I want, blah, blah, blah. And man, it just couldn't be more of an asshole compared to now, where it's like, man, I really didn't know what I was doing, what I was talking about. Now, years later, I have that perspective on that kid and realize, what an idiot. You had so much to learn. You just are lucky that you made it through these projects.
There is a lot of trial and error in trying to get these effects to be correct. I know now when I'm mentoring the next generation, sometimes they feel as if we were born just knowing the answer, right? That we just came into the world knowing exactly how to light a Templo del Fuego. And the answer is really, we don't know it until we start to do it. And then we try to bring all of our knowledge together and all of the tools and all of the different technologies to tell the best story.
Sitting around PortAventura as we were opening the attraction, and myself and Francois were talking, and we were talking about maybe starting a production company. We started saying, well, with Craig, we can be a design and production company. And so the three of us started talking and having coffees together and decided to go forward and create a design and production company together. And so, yeah, that Templo del Fuego was the spark for the three of us to come together and create ThinkWell.
You know, theme parks are famous for doing things that have never been done before. So there's not always an answer. Like, I don't have a book that just says, here's how to do every ghost ever or every phantom ever. It's always going to be different based on what story and what role that phantom has in the story. Creativity is such a big part of this, and collaboration is key to any successful project. I see a lot of projects right now that are isolating their teams to a point that is not beneficial, right? Okay. It's not beneficial to say the lighting designer should come in after the concept is already created. We should be there when the concept is being created, because we might be able to say, oh no, that's a great lighting effect. You don't need projection for that. That would be great lighting. But over here, that's not a great lighting effect. That should absolutely be media or projection, right? And to be there early in that process. Templo del Fuego is a great example of that. We were a team the whole way through. I think you see the benefits of that.
The attraction turned out so well. It was such a great addition to the park. I'm still super proud of that.
Jo crec que l'atracció era bona, tenia èxit.
The fact that Craig Hanna is such a great storyteller, the whole setup of the queue and then the waiting area and then the first pre-show scene really sets the anticipation of the story. So by the time you get into the space and you walk into the awe of the temple, people are ready. They're excited, and the fact we get right into the effects, we kill off the actor right away.
Tejana es, bueno, es increíble.
All of that, I'm super proud of that show. It was one of the things I have enjoyed the most in my 35-year career.
Dels dos puc parlar amb meravelles, no? I el record que els hi tinc professional i personal és meravellós, no?
I think you have to always keep putting yourself to places where opportunity can happen. Luck happens because you make it happen. It's not you put yourself in the right environment, and keep your eyes open, and just, we always just work hard. And I think it's always I think I tell myself, trust that delivering things, getting it done, is a great value.
No m'arrepenteixo de res. Sí. Si ho pogués tornar a fer, o sigui, si tingués que tornar, hi tornaria. Per mi va ser meravellós.
Perquè llavors, vulguis que no, fèiem una mica de respecte, molta il·lusió i una mica de respecte. La tecnologia és molt important i, per tant, l'aportació dels enginyers és molt important. No has de motivar a ningú perquè tothom està motivat. Això té una gran avantatge, que en tots els projectes no ho aconsegueixes. És a dir, no vaig tenir necessitat de motivar a ningú perquè tothom estava tan motivat, perquè el projecte era tan bonic.
That's cool. Yeah.
We gave everybody on the project team a bottle of hot sauce. So we had a custom label made for this hot sauce.
Però tot el que vam aconseguir va ser gràcies a l'equip que tenia d'enginyers, d'arquitectes, d'aparelladors.
Victor truly became one of my closest friends. He knows everybody because he walks up to you and instantly you feel that he cares. He was the very first Spaniard that I was spending a lot of time with. Yeah, so that I don't think I could have delivered Fiesta Ventura in the 103 days without the support of Victor Caballero. Victor's always been a special person, and in this industry, everywhere I traveled with Victor, no matter what country or city or place, he knew somebody. We'd walk through a street and someone would say, Vic, would come and hug him, and it didn't matter whether it was Madrid, Seville, New York, Grand Canyon. Literally, we ran into someone in the Grand Canyon with Victor Caballero. So Victor just was one of those people. He always made an impression on people, a positive impression. And he always was a connector. He always was bringing people together. He just brought positivity to a new level with everyone.